Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 5 or 6 perfect brawlers within the game right now. So it's that time of the season where probably balance changes are looming and people are wondering where to spend their power points. So these are going to be brawlers that I think are very safe in the sense that they're not going to get a nerf, but they actually are particularly strong, especially in some game modes. So make sure to stick around until the end to get to know every single brawler that you should be maxing out. Okay, so jumping into the first brawler who I think you should be pretty safe in maxing out, it is Brock. So Brock is a fantastic option in this meta right now. I'd actually start to say that he's starting to go towards the A tier because he's a very strong pick in Heist and he's never banned out in Power League. And for me, he's not going to receive a nerf anytime soon because he's on the kind of grasp of pretty good in some game modes, but then weak in others. So again, in other game modes as well, knockout, you see, if you watch my stream, I literally got stopped playing like 2 knockout games in a row because, again, people just underestimate the Brock, but he's honestly such a strong brawler right now, and especially since the likes of Max have kind of evaporated from the meta, but like Brock is just able to thrive even more so. And people always underestimate his range as well because, of course, his rocket has quite a big radius, and as well, bounty is pretty good. And I looked at the stats as well because that's a good kind of underlying way to see whether like certain brawlers are going to get a balance change or not in terms of their use rate and their win rate. And, you know, Brock has a high use rate, but not really the highest win rate. So I think it's pretty safe to say that he's not going to get a nerf, but he is pretty strong. So next up, we have Gus. So Gus is a fantastic option to max out right now. I pretty much vouch for him in every single meta, but I still think he's a really strong brawler. But in the casual play, he's not like the most pop-off brawler, right? Because when it comes down to 3v3 modes, maybe you're not sure that you're going to be facing off against tanks. But in Power League, you can kind of confirm yourself that you're not facing off against tanks. And that's where, of course, Gus just absolutely excels. So I looked at the data as well, and his win rate is probably average, and his use rate is probably on the higher side of things, but I don't think it's anything too alarming for me, even in his best game modes like knockout and bounties. So for me, I think it's pretty safe, especially if I was looking on the balance side of things. You know, he is really strong, don't get me wrong. I think he's an S tier brawler, but I still don't really see him get a nerf. If he's going to get a nerf, it's probably maybe going to be to his gadget overall. I think it's pretty safe to max him out. So jumping into the next brawler, I think you're pretty safe in maxing out. It is RT. I think he's a really strong brawler, but again, he's kind of on the edge of things that he's not strong enough to get nerfed. Maybe his Hacks gadget could receive a small nerf, but I still see him being a pretty strong brawler in the meta. And maybe we might even see kind of like a change to his super as well. So if anything, he could get like an indirect buff in the next update because everyone is kind of talking about how terrible his super is. But anyways, it's good to max out because he's really strong in a lot of different game modes. So bounty, knockout right now, he's like the go-to brawler for me. You know, he kind of fulfills that Gus role where he's good against everything, and of course he's still decent against aggro with his super. And then, you know, I've seen him played in multiple game modes as well, probably everything except for Heist, I'll say that is decent in him. But across the board, he just has such a good synergy. And even though I looked at the stats, and they're quite alarming because he's pretty much at the top of win rates and use rates, but that's only because he's a typically new brawler, and those stats are pretty scuffed. But overall, I think you're very safe in maxing out RT, and he's a very strong brawler. So next up on the max out list, we have Ruffs. So Ruffs, for a while, has always been in the back of my head in a sense, like I can't grasp why he's one of the least used brawlers in the game. I've seen it on Twitter a few months ago. I checked the data again, and it's literally like the 6th least used brawler in the game. I don't know whether it's just because he's a little bit boring to play for the casual player. For me, he's actually one of the most fun brawlers to play because he's so powerful, and especially in the right settings. So I think it's pretty safe to presume that he's not going to receive any type of nerf because, of course, the use rates like are really alarming. They're really low. So of course, they're kind of maybe even looking at ways to buff him secretly, like with stop hours or something, to actually make him a little bit more viable for the casual player. But yeah, for me, Ruffs, he's so strong across every single game mode. Again, I looked at data in terms of every single game mode. I think the only one that stood out was Gem Grab, where he had a really good win rate. Other than that, across the board, he's pretty solid, but in competitive, he's very good. So make sure to max him out. So the next brawler I definitely recommend maxing out, it is Gray. So again, Gray is a brawler that a lot of people typically think he's very strong, but in terms of data, again, I feel like it doesn't really say that he's one of the most broken brawlers in the game right now. I'd say in terms of win rate and use rate, it's somewhere in the middle of the pack, so that is pretty decent across the board. But even in his best game modes in bounty and knockout, there's nothing kind of alarming to me, so I think it's pretty safe. And also, if you spoke to a lot of different pros, that obviously appreciate that Gray is strong, but he's not like game breaking. He's just got a really good gadget and he's good against throwers. So for me, the only reason why I wouldn't max out Gray is potentially in the next update for just remove unbreakable walls, because then that would make throwers bad, and Gray is a great counter to throwers. So you kind of get how things are kind of leaning into like a Gray meta right now, because he's so strong against throwers. So I think he's definitely safe. I don't see any nerf coming soon. Okay, so jumping into the next brawler who I think is incredibly strong and won't receive any type of nerf, so pretty safe to max out. It is Lola. So Lola is just a really good option across the board. Sometimes she can kind of weirdly go in and out the meta just because of other brawlers in and around her, but I think it's pretty solid. She's always a pretty good option. A lot of the times, you know, if you're stuck on a mid, you can probably go a Lola. If you're stuck on someone to go on heist or hot zone, you can easily go a Lola because she does so much damage. And I've even seen Lola on knockout and bounty recently, so she's starting to become even more meta outside of other game modes, because she recently received a buff to her star power. I think it was sealed with a kiss. Getting that extra healing is actually pretty underrated, and pros are starting to use it a lot. So for me, Lola's actually secretly strong. And again, the stats around her in terms of use rate and also win rate isn't really alarmingly high. I think the use rate is actually the bottom 10. So if anything, you're pretty safe in maxing out Lola. So next up, we have another great brawler in Carl. So for me, he's that type of guy, if you're really good on the Carl, you can absolutely pop off all of the time. I see it in competitive still. So many times people just leave Carl as a last pick and he'll just absolutely carry. Of course, you got to be a good Carl and get some good gadgets. But for me, I think he's definitely one of the best brawlers in the game right now. But in terms of stats, it's not really kind of obvious in terms of the casual player base that Carl is that really strong brawler. He's like middle of the pack in terms of win rates and use rates, but for me, he's so versatile, and I don't really see anyone really complaining about how strong Carl is. But I think in the right setting, definitely he's incredibly strong. Of course, he has to worry a little bit by like how strong Shelly is in the meta, but if there's no Shelly on the map, then of course Carl can dominate. There's a lot of Mr. P, there's a lot of Squeak, which he just absolutely destroys. And again, bounty, brubble, gem grab, literally all of these game modes, he's going to dominate. So it's pretty safe to max out Carl. Let me know who you think is the safest option in the comment section below.